Do you actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast?
It's a great day to be alive.
Damn, hold on.
Surfing.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the good chef, Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt Marchesini. And just a quick reminder, we are the official K-State representative on the College Huddle. So if you're not following them, go to thecollegehuddle.com and follow them on social media at College Huddle. But tonight we have Ryan Gilbert, AKA Gills of GoPowerCat.com and 247 Sports and the Big 12 K-State Insiders joining us for some mid or early, however you want to put it, season grades for football and to maybe get our hands a little dirty with some hoops discussion as the Cats are just about 28 days away from their exhibition game against Fort Hays State. Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
Guys, I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Just off of the first, minute or so with that intro, this is going to be a little change of pace from what, the Go Power Cat shows are like, but I'm here for it. I'm happy. So, guys, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But before we get started, this beer crack is brought to you by Annie Mae's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. Annie Mae's has been in business for 50 years and is an absolute must-visit destination in Aggieville on game days and school nights alike. Annie Mae's is far and away my favorite destination in Aggieville, and I always make a point to go visit my auntie every time I come back to the Little Apple. They feature a wide variety of craft cocktails, draft beers, and everything in between, along with entertainment like live music, comedy, and other events every single week. Check out their website, www.anniemays.com, to get a list of their upcoming events. And one thing I want to quick plug, if you're a Royals fan, or if you're not, if you just like cheap beer, Annie Mae's is doing $2 hams for every single Royals game this season. So go check out a Royals game at Annie Mae's. They're playing in the play. They're 1-0. Let's support our local Kansas City Royals and support your local Annie Mae's Parlor. Again, that's at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville, and be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. Additionally, this show is brought to you by Pat's Beef Jerky, located at 401 Main Street in Liebenthal, Kansas. Pat's Beef Jerky has been serving up the finest beef jerky in the Midwest for 34 years running, and they feature mouthwatering flavors like the classic beef jerky, teriyaki beef jerky, and the savory beef pepper sticks. There are 3 places where you can get yourself some Pat's Beef Jerky. Chef is gone. You can pick it up at 401 Main Street at their original store, at the Fridge Liquor Store in Manhattan, or last but not least, you can pick it up at Pat's Beef Jerky online at www.patsbeefjerky.com. They have also shipped to all 50 states of the great United States of America. So if you've not placed your order yet, what are you waiting for? And to sweeten the pot, you can use the promo code CATS at checkout for 10% off of your next order. So use the promo code CATS. It's on our banner at the bottom of the screen for 10% off your next order at www.patsbeefjerky.com. And without further ado, Ryan, I want to get into the football. Is it mid-season or early season at this point? We're through 5 games, but I feel like this could be a little bit of a longer season for the Cats.
I think like bye week, right? With where things are right now, bye week kind of checkpoint. But man, it's already flying by. We're 5 games in. That's just honestly, I know that's kind of cliche to say, but that's crazy to think that it's almost halfway done.
Yes, and
welcome back.
It's the shortest season and the longest off season in all of sports. So let's enjoy it while we can. Let's enjoy DJ Giddens while we can, and we'll get to him here in a moment. But for the season grades, we'll start off with you, Ryan, and then I want to hear Matt and Chef's thoughts with each position group. But I want to get us started off on the offensive line. This was a group that coming into the season, we had some question marks, not around their potential, but around, it was a group that had a ton of starters last year. We retired a lot of those guys to the NFL draft and to graduation, but you had guys who had that rotational depth and that rotational experience coming in, guys like Carver Willis, Hadley Panzer, Taylor Poitier, all those guys came back this season. So I'm curious, where are your thoughts on the offensive line? Do you feel like they've maybe gelled to the point where we can feel confident with them moving forward in the season? Just unsolicited thoughts on the offensive line.
Offensive lines really in general kind of get better as seasons progress, just with gelling and obviously getting to know each other, working around each other. But yeah, you mentioned it, losing Cooper Beebe and Hayden Gillen from last year, that's big, right? Obviously the leadership, but also just playing football simply. You're losing two of those starters is very, I wouldn't say hard, but that's a challenge for Connor Riley to really hone in on that. But you guys have to remember that DJ Giddens, like, he doesn't create his own running lanes. Like, those are obviously, the offensive line deserves a lot of credit there. And sure, I know that obviously Avery Johnson's maybe been pressured a few times too many that we would like, but by and large, man, I think it's tough to be too critical through 5 games of that O-line. Obviously after they lost, a couple of key playmakers, and, I think they can get better as the season certainly goes on.
So if you're putting a letter grade on the offensive line, what would you grade them as?
Man, so this is funny. We're doing a piece on Go Power Cat here. It'll be up in the next day or two with all the position groups, grading it. So I feel like, man, if I give a grade here, it's got to stick on that. So this is tough, man. I would probably go B- for that group. That's probably fair.
Above average, which is
Sure.
about all you can ask for with an offensive line. Matt, let's get your thoughts. Agree, disagree, or where would you grade them?
Above average. I mean, I would tend to agree with that assessment. I would probably be like a B-. That's above average, right? C, yeah. Average. That was like my GPA at K-State, but they've definitely had some moments. I think some stronger games, obviously, compared to some others. Every position group's worst game, I feel, was the BYU game, and that was a game where, there were a lot of mistakes that were made, but in reality, to try and come back, you have to put a young quarterback in a position where he has the time to make some decisions, make things happen. And the offensive line just did not have a great game there. But yeah, they've been all right. I was a little worried at the beginning of the season because historically, I mean, if you bring in guys, if it's a newer offensive line, it usually takes a little bit longer to gel. This has been kind of a situation where I think they've grown and made some adjustments and have gotten better before we kind of hit the meat of the season, with especially 2 road games in which communication on the offensive line is going to be absolutely huge. So hopefully they learned a lot from the BYU game so that they can, do well and keep an Avery safe in Boulder and in Morgantown.
Chef, you're last.
I'm gonna pray that my connection just stays strong enough where I don't sound like a robot. But for the offensive line, I think it's got to be higher than a B- in my opinion. Statistically speaking, this running attack is something we haven't seen through 5 games ever at K-State. I mean, the yards per play is out of control. And you laid it out there. We did lose an All-American in Cooper Beebe, and KT Levison was a draft pick. And those are monster offensive linemen and a 3-year starter at center, basically. But the numbers speak for themselves. We did have a clunker in the red zone versus at BYU. There are some anomalies that you can speak of, but consistently the running game is at a point where I can't. If you're making historic precedent at Kansas State, you cannot be anything more than an A, in my opinion. So I'll go A- just because I know there is some room to improve. And, the depth is also a thing that I'm really impressed with. That, you didn't lose John. You haven't lost anybody long term. We got a little bit of a scare with Hadley Panzer at the beginning of the year, but everybody's been healthy and we're able to rotate guys when we need to.
Can't hear you, bro.
Off mute. Good job.
I'm going to throw an audible here. So I want to, since we've talked already a little bit about the running game, where would you rate the running backs, knowing that, DJ Giddens is on a historic pace at this point?
Be pretty easy to say A+, except for the fumble against BYU. I'm a believer that maybe things unravel, but nothing is going to snowball the way it did if things don't start with that DJ fumble. So I would go like A minus, but other than that, it's been not only DJ Giddens, but of course Dylan Edwards, and the depth in that room is really good as well. So if it wasn't for that fumble in Provo, I would go A plus, but I'll go A minus.
I am 100% on board with that. That would have been what I would say. I mean, they've done an incredible job and it really catapulted us in these games. And so DJ Giddens, I mean, looking game after game like a guy who's going to be a player on Sundays. And Dylan Edwards, I mean, everybody, has kind of talked about him getting more touches and whatnot. It's going to come with time. I feel like as he develops into the offense and continues to acclimate, he's going to get there, but it's really hard to give away touches from DJ Giddens at this point. And so hopefully we maybe see Dylan a little bit more in the slot and give him some opportunities, to get into some open space.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, it's A minus. It's 1-1 with the offensive line. They're on a historic pace. Well, maybe not historic pace in terms of running backs, because we did have a guy named Darren Sproles, but DJ Giddens is in a league of his own right now, and he's carrying the mantle from what Deuce Vaughn left him in terms of legacy at Kansas State. He's one of one really in his own style, a Junction City kid, unheralded, and he paved his own way. But this season, like Matt said, we want to get Dylan Edwards the ball more, but how are you going to get him the ball more? How are you going to get more rushing yards than we already have? It's going to be hard to do it, but the group as a whole, it's been really, really good, dude.
And for me, it's the 7.3 yards per carry that that DJ Giddens is averaging right now. It's just that when I say he's on a historic pace, I mean, through 5 games to still be averaging 7.3 yards per carry. I get that after 1 or 2, but 5, he's on. That's a trend. That's not just, flash in the pan type of situation. All right. I want to move on to maybe I'm curious to see how much the last game will weight your opinion on this position group, but the wide receivers who turned a bit of a corner in the last game, but it was very slow to get out of the gate. Ryan, where are you at with the wide receiver group?
Yeah, I'm not going to let the recency bias get the best of me here, man. I mean, that was a serviceable game against Oklahoma State from the wideouts, but it wasn't great by any means. But it was nice to see Jaden Jackson finally kind of get involved. Ty Bowman had the first catch in that game. Jace Brown's been solid, had that big touchdown against the Pokes. But man, if you take away that performance, it would be, guys, I think it'd be an F. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they can kind of get things going. And also just what's disappointing with the wideouts, to be honest, is the hype, the expectation that was heading into the year with Dante Cephas coming in from Penn State, and obviously some of those depth pieces, Trey Spivey, Sterling Lockett. I thought there was a couple of wild cards that, one of those guys was going to step up, and we just haven't seen it. So I hope that group, Matthew Middleton's squad, can kind of build upon that game against Oklahoma State. But if you throw that one out the window, it has been a massive disappointment for those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Oklahoma State game obviously looked like a little bit of a turning the corner, but it was giving an opportunity to, just try and get some open, just get open. I mean, and that's been the struggle all season. I have been, I feel like Keegan Johnson has really kind of turned more of a corner this season. We've seen him, make some plays. Obviously, Jace had a huge game. We saw Trey Spivey earlier in the year. We thought he was going to get some more, touches as we went along. And in reality, it's just been, I think everybody's just trying to get used to, how can we help get open, and have Avery see us, that's just been a piece of the puzzle that hasn't fully worked yet, except for the last game. So I do feel, especially in some games where, upcoming, I think it's going to be kind of a shootout, some of these games, they have to improve. We got to see some guys who, make some adjustments, try and, get open. Dante Cephas would be an awesome one for that. But, I think my feeling is shot on him at this point, for what he's done.
Yeah.
But like a D, I don't know. I feel like that's being nice.
I'm gonna give him a man. I'm always lean. I'm a lenient teacher when it comes to these grades, man. I'm gonna give him a C minus. I'm gonna let him pass. Keegan Johnson, outside of those first 2 games, really, I mean, he's been serviceable, and it's not like after last season's hype, like Ryan was saying, the hype, was built up for these guys. And last year we got a lot of it, and we gave Keegan the benefit of the doubt because he was injured. But I think we're really seeing what he can be. And that's a guy that's going to get you, those 5 to 4 catches a game, 40 yards, 10 yards per catch. I'm not expecting the world from Keegan Johnson or any receiver outside of Jace Brown. This team is just a bunch of serviceable guys to facilitate from Avery. And it's unfortunate that it's like that, but the offense is kind of leaning more towards a 2 tight end set anyway. So we're leaning more towards those tight ends being kind of the focal point of the offense, especially in the red zone. So I'm going to give them a C minus because I know that there's a little bit left in there, and they showed a little bit more heart than I thought they were in that Oklahoma State game. So I think that's more their speed right there.
The next one, so another group of pass catchers or blockers, depending on which one you prefer more. We're going tight ends. So this is a position group where 4 different guys have caught touchdowns so far this season. That's 3 more than any wide receiver on the roster right now. Tight ends, where are you at?
If we were just basing this off of red zone production, like A plus 100%, but so that's obviously gonna, they've done well for sure. The depth of that group has been tremendous, but between the 20s, I think you'd still like to maybe see more. Obviously, I know that Garrett Oakley's been hurt, and so I don't want to be too critical on him, but that's a guy that I think all of us can agree. We thought he'd have maybe more of a Ben Sinnott role, and he hasn't really had that. I know he had that score where he was wide open against Oklahoma State, but get more consistent, not just inside of the red zone. Get your top dog, Garrett Oakley, more involved. I think there's still a lot more in the tank. So you guys are probably going to have a higher grade than me. Man, I would go B plus, probably B, but there's a lot more for this group to show.
I actually am going to go above that. I'm going to say A minus. I think this group has just grown so much, and kind of I would even say unexpectedly, because a lot of us thought it was going to be Garrett Oakley all the way, and Braden Lofton has really shown a lot at the position. Even Will Swanson, who's a guy who a lot of people have considered to be like a blocking tight end, etc., and he had some opportunities last season to make some plays, and he had a couple of like drops, I remember, in some of those games. And so you really thought his major, contribution was being able to block. And, he's made some catches this season. And we saw Will Ancio, who had his first touchdown this past game. Braden Lofton, had a touchdown catch as well. So I like seeing how we can use these tight ends, especially when we look at, Lincoln Cure potentially, he's, coming in, even though he'll be a freshman next year, but what he could provide to this offense, potentially. I hope that what our offense is showing, he looks at that and says, I can be a contributor early on in my career coming to K-State. But we shall see.
Yeah, we shall see. I am, I've got my eye on that one. That's a storyline that's very interesting. No, but seriously, I'm gonna give the tight end group a B plus, no, an A minus. I'm going to give him an A minus. And here's the reason, Matt, you touched on it a little bit. Just like the offensive line, they are major contributors in this blocking game for the run game. The blocking that they've shown, Will Ancio in that Oklahoma State game, he had multiple pancakes. I mean, they're getting after it. They're being real nasty up front. And they're not being in between the 20s, like Ryan was saying. They're not in between the 20s, really a threat of getting you major yardage, pushing it down the field. But in the run game, they are being excellent out on the edge and blocking. I can only remember maybe one penalty on the tight ends. I think that was in BYU with Will Swanson, a hold maybe. But these guys they're aligning right. And there's a lot of them. I think the room as a whole has improved to the point where I think they're not necessarily missing the production from Ben Sinnott, because the wide receivers are, and DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards are lifting that weight off of what Ben Sinnott left. But the blocking has really impressed me from this group, and the red zone threat. So I'm going to give them an A- because I was not expecting any of this from three of them for sure.
And the last position group, which is really a group of one, is quarterback. You've got Avery Johnson. And after that last game, I feel like he's maybe hitting his stride a little bit. And he's so far this season, 9 touchdowns passing, 4 interceptions, 2 rushing touchdowns, 879 total yards passing, and then 321 on the ground. Is he living up to the hype, and is he going to be able to continue his stride? Ryan, where would you grade him so far? And curious also where you think the outlook is for Avery.
Yeah, probably give him a B, and that may be a little bit too harsh based off of what we kind of saw on Saturday. But you mentioned the 4 interceptions, and I don't think any of those were good plays. Maybe one of them was kind of a fluky one, but I think all of them were just either bad throws or bad reads from Avery. And so, but he's learned and he's gotten better, and that's what you need to see from a true sophomore quarterback. And I think he's certainly learned from it. Also, you look at that loss in Provo, beyond the interceptions, mentally, I think Avery Johnson got overwhelmed. I'm sure he would tell us the same thing, that it all snowballed. And so he's obviously come a long way. Just 7 days removed from that game against Oklahoma State, played tremendous. And I think that with the play calling and the coaching and hiding the playbook and all that stuff that we were so fed up with early on in the year, guys, you can't pour everything on a true sophomore quarterback in game number 1 or in game number 3 or in game number 5. Now, by season's end, obviously there's going to be so much more comfortability with that playbook, but even nearly halfway through the year, guys, like, you got to remember, this is still, Alan Bowman was playing college, or was he committed, or was he playing when Avery Johnson was in like 7th grade? Like, so yeah. He's still a young guy. Give him time. I think the outlook is looking great, but at the same time, though, he has made mistakes. Go back to that Tulane game. Sterling Lockett has a wide open score if Avery delivers a decent ball. He's missed some guys. Dante Cephas has not been good. He's dropped passes. He's been on the opposite page of Avery Johnson, but there's still been some passes to him I think Avery would like back. And so I think B is fair. He's shown off his upside, his potential, especially with his legs against Oklahoma State, getting out of the pocket and scoring. But he's also shown us why he still is a young quarterback.
I'll agree. I was going to say B as well, just because we see these flashes of him being an A+ quarterback. Like, there are just some plays. I mean, even some of what you would regard as like maybe the simple ones of just him on the run, making a 10, 15-yard pass, but that pass is right on the money. I mean, and you see some of those plays and you combine it with just some kind of bonehead ones that he has too. The bonehead ones, I truly believe are fixable ones, just because you're a young quarterback. Really, as the speed of the game slows down, you'll get better with those. But the sky really is the limit. You see it just in some of these drives, a guy who's leading this team, a guy who has the skill set to exceed even what people are describing him as. So it's going to be fun. I mean, especially for 5 games in, I feel like he's done a good job. It's probably unfair, when you think about it, but he's done a really great job, and so I'm going to say a B for right now.
Are we just going to go 3 straight Bs across the board? I mean, it's the Billionaire Boys Club for right now, because I'm going B as well. Man, Avery, I mean, you really set the precedent high when that Pop-Tarts Bowl, and we kind of saw exactly what he could do, and that was just a glimpse of it, really. But that game really showed that he had the maturity where he wasn't going to throw the ball into harm's way. He was throwing the ball a lot out of bounds when things would break down and nothing was there. I think he's taking a little bit more chances, especially in that BYU game. He got a little flustered and he just started slinging that thing. But he's got some room to improve. And Ryan, you made a great point. I've not really even thought about that they just can't lay everything on him at the very beginning of his career. Right then, we're talking 6 games in. You can't just give him all that. He's still probably working on packages. I mean, they brought the pistol out. That was probably the first time I've seen the pistol all year. And this guy has got so much in the bag, and he's showing glimpses, like Matt said, like Ryan said, that it gives you just that glimmer of hope that if he could put 3 straight A games, it doesn't really matter who's on the other side of the ball, that they're going to be in trouble because we got a difference maker, a guy that, does his thing. So I'm going to give him a B, and I think he's trending up. That GPA is rising.
Just got to get some extra credit in a couple classes, and he'll raise that GPA a little bit more. So coordinator wise, you've got two new guys to K-State when it comes to either play calling with Connor Riley being first time play caller at K-State, and Matt Wells, who was new to the program as an outsider coming in. Where would you rate maybe Matt Wells as quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator, being the guy who's talking to Avery in the helmet, and then Connor Riley? You feel free to combine them if you want, but you can also separate out your grade. But Connor Riley as a first-time play caller, curious how you would rate those two guys so far through 5 weeks.
I feel like you got to just kind of throw it all into one. I mean, it's so whenever there's a big play, right? I think Avery Johnson or Jace Brown, or the players kind of get the credit for those. And whenever there's a play that doesn't work out, oh, that's a terrible play call. And there might be some truth to that, but I think there's a lot of overreactions with the coordinators really on the bad plays. And so K-State's offense is, in terms of yardage, the 5th best in the Big 12 right now. Give credit where it's due. Now, guys, I'll be the first to tell you that, a 3rd and 9 out in Provo on your opening drive and you run the football makes absolutely no sense to me, or it shouldn't make sense to anybody. There's been certainly some questionable calls that I disagree with, that I can back up, that I think are, really just bad calls, bad designs, bad schemes. There's been a handful of those plays, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like what I said with Avery, right? Like, this team is 4-1. The play calling, the coordinate, that plays a big part in it. And so we can nitpick and be critical if we want. So there's been some stuff to, I'd give it a B, but I mean, at the end of the day, they've only lost 1 game. The offense has been pretty good. So, I think Riley and Wells have done a above average job.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think there were some growing pains early on, which is natural, especially with you have 2 heads that are kind of working together, and you have a guy in Connor Riley who's very much new to a role of this kind of caliber. The Oklahoma State game, I think, was a really great called game for the most part. There's still some kind of head-scratching decisions that, as an average layperson who has no experience coordinating an offense, would probably wonder what's going on here. Why aren't we running it on 3rd and 1? Or why are we trying to pass on 3rd and 1? I don't know. But, we always seem to have at least one of those in the game. So, I think as they grow comfortable with trying to develop Avery into this offense, it's going to get a little bit easier for them as well, and trying to see what he's comfortable with, Avery's comfortable with, what they think he can put together, in a certain drive and going from there. But I would say a B. I think, kind of they've been above average, I would say, for the first, handful of games this season.
The problem is I just didn't really know what to expect coming into the season. Like, what is our identity? I really didn't know. Were we going to be trying to let Avery, because there was a lot of talk about letting Avery throw the ball a lot more, limit his runs, and we kind of saw that at the beginning. But then when we expanded and we started running and we got the identity together, things changed for me and how I perceived Connor Riley's offense and Matt Wells coordinating this thing. With us running the ball as effectively as we have, I'm going to give him an A in that light, because at the beginning of the season I didn't know what to expect, and I was really pushing low towards like a C, because we were hearing pass to score and, run to win the game. And it wasn't happening like that. But now that we know exactly what the offense is looking like and what to expect from DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, Avery Johnson, I think you got to give them an A, because we are effectively running the ball better than we ever have before. So, man, he's putting game plans and scheming up to, be effective in the red zone for the most part. And, the questionable play calling, I think you can do that with everything, because every play call is built to work. I mean, it's all built to work. And we're going to say sometimes the players screw up. Sometimes the plays look a little wonky, but if it's 3rd and 9 and they're all dropped back and you run a draw to the left and there should be nobody there, but somebody misses a block and he only gets 6 yards, we're all going to be like, why are you doing that? But you can always go hindsight 2020 on that. But man, I'm going to give him an A right now, because I love the ground and pound is just exactly how I like it. I like an O lineman that's, getting down nasty and pancaking guys. So let's keep running the ball. Let's run for 400 next week.
That's a great,
or next week.
That's a great throwback to the pass to score, run to win. I had forgotten about that. Pivoting over to the defense. So this is a defense that right now, according to collegefootballinsiders.com, is ranked 18th in overall defensive efficiency through week 5 in the nation. I'd say that's a pretty damn good spot to be in compared to maybe where we were after the first couple of weeks, or especially after BYU. But defensively, let's start with the defensive line. You've got, a little bit of an injury bug maybe hitting that with Uso being out. Hopefully it's only for a week or 2 weeks, but Uso Seumalo, Damian Ilalio, and then you've got some guys who came in and showed some good flashes, like Toby O coming off the defensive end, and Brendan Mott, who's continued to sustain some of the level of success he's had and proven over the last couple of years. But where would you rate this defensive line group as a whole? And if you want, feel free to break out, the tackles from the DNs, but I just want to get your letter grade on the DL.
Probably an A-, man. They've been pretty dang good. I think Brendan Mott is one of the Big 12's most underrated players, and what he's done, obviously the stats, but some of the stuff that does not show up on the stat sheet really is what, Mott just pressuring the quarterback, getting holding calls. And so Mott's been great. I mean, the depth at that position, K-State's got a deep roster at many different groups, but on the defensive line overall, that is a group that can just rotate in so many guys, and that's what makes them really so good. I mean, to maybe separate it a little bit, we'll see moving forward without Uso for the next couple of weeks, but probably the biggest surprise prior to the end of the summer is Damian Ilalio, right? Like, we did not expect him to have this role. He's been a great run stopper. So A-. They haven't been necessarily perfect, but they've been pretty darn good.
I'll just go under that. I'll say B+. I mean, I think it's been a very solid group thus far. You mentioned Brendan Mott, and that's a great way to put it. I think he's an extremely underrated player in the Big 12. He is just extremely athletic. I mean, he finds ways to get to the quarterback, extremely skilled in his position. Earlier in the year, we saw Toby Osunsami, playing very, very well. And he's kind of like a baby giraffe, just growing into the position and finding ways to where he can learn, how can I best get to the quarterback, with my speed. I'll be interested to see how he develops in his career, gaining some of the skills, not necessarily having to leverage speed all the time, but how, what are some other ways that you can get to the quarterback. Damian Ilalio, who you mentioned, I think all of us were super surprised with, seeing him so high on the depth chart prior to the first game of the season. He's really delivered. Having Uso Seumalo kind of as your backup, a guy who's played so many games, really means you developed and improved so much during fall camp. It is sad, especially in kind of garbage time, that Uso kind of sustained that injury. Hopefully, again, it's only a handful of weeks and we can get him back out there. I'm going to say B+ for this group.
I'm going to go, man, I don't want to agree with Matt. I just don't like doing that, but I'm going to say B+ as well. There's room to improve, because there's guys that they've been out there and they've done some good things, but like Achidi Obiazor, I had such high hopes for the kid, and he's still young. He's a redshirt freshman, for God's sakes. What am I asking for? But he hasn't really popped. I mean, this Oklahoma State game, he was great. I mean, he was going heads up with Ollie Gordon multiple times. But guys like that, you just wanted a little bit more. Jordan Allen, just those strong D ends that we heard such high praise for in the fall camp, that it just hasn't popped necessarily. But Brennan Mott, revelation, coming back from when he had a monster season when he was next to Felix Anudike-Uzama to last season when he kind of just was off the face of the earth and there was no production given, but now he's back to his old self, and it's really, really, really been nice. And, the D tackles, you cannot talk about them without, heaping praise on them, because everybody and their mom thought that this was the weak point of the whole defense, really, how there was no depth. We brought in a defensive lineman that might be academically ineligible for all we know. He hasn't played yet, but Malcolm Alcorn Crowder hasn't seen the field. He decommitted because he didn't make grades, and now he's back and he still hasn't seen the field. We were a little nervous about this group, but Damian Alalio, dog. Uso, he's really been proving himself, but, getting hurt, but he's a hurt dog. So, man, I'm really proud of this D line. I'm gonna give them a B+ because I know there's a lot in that bag still that they could get to this quarterback, because we were getting sacks out the wazoo. But Matt, you used to give them a lot of shit, boy, back in the day, talking about we can't get there without blitzing and all this stuff. I remember that talk. I remember that. So I'm gonna give them a B+, but I'll let Matt rebuttal, because
there are games that's definitely the case. I mean, the Tulane game was a prime example of that, but it's okay. It's okay. They've improved.
Oh, geez. And I think that group has a ton of potential, to your point, Chef. Like, we still haven't quite seen what they can do. If this team's already at 18th in the country in defensive efficiency, who knows where this team can go to, if there is still potential, even on the DL. But I do want to chat linebackers. So you've got Austin Romaine, salad boy, I think, as Scott Wildcat's dad called him on the Bosco's Boys Review pod. But you've got Austin Romaine leading the team right now with tackles at 34. He's got 2 sacks. Austin Moore, again, continuing to be that leader, and he's got 18 tackles himself. Desmond Purnell, Topeka Cat, 16 tackles and doing his thing. Where would you guys grade the linebacker group so far?
I'll keep this one kind of pretty short and sweet here. And this might be a little bit of a disrespect to, the splash that Austin Romaine has created. And, there's been some plays, there's been some big plays, but I just give it a B because they're steady. You know what you're getting out of a leader like Austin Moore, and Des Purnell is just solid. And so they're not going to lose you the game. They're not going to make those mistakes, but obviously, again, Austin Romaine had the play of the game against Tulane. But other than that, it just seems like a group that maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. If you can get, pressure on the quarterback with your defensive line, like we're talking about, that's okay. So I give it a B, maybe a B+ to be nice.
No. I was taking B+. I can't.
Okay, I'll go back to B. My bad.
No, you're good. Austin Romaine, I mean, I will sing this as high to the mountaintops as possible, but he got a lot of crap last year, even though he was a true freshman, and the games he played as a true freshman, learned on the fly how to be a linebacker in a power conference, and has taken that and run with it. He's been just really, like, very steadfast and kind of how he's developed and improved, and being out there and having him with Austin Moore and Des Purnell and it's a solid group. I mean, a lot of people were talking about Alec Marenko coming in, and he's been hurt, and so it's kind of been this, kind of the same people, as last year that ended up really picking it up. So I'm going to say B+. I think this has been a very strong group, steady. Maybe they are a little quiet with regards to, some things in the production area, but they do what they need to do, and I feel like they work really well with that defensive line to make plays. So I'm gonna say B plus.
I love that answer, but I'm gonna go B. I'm gonna follow Ryan's lead, and a lot of it has to. You guys nailed the starting three. I think those are all obvious. Those are household names. They've been playing really steady Eddie football. Desmond Purnell has been really explosive. I mean, in that Arizona game, he was single-handedly shutting down the run game for Arizona. But this is where I want to take it because, a guy like Zach Wittenberg on special teams has been nails, dude. Absolutely money from that. He's been calling the whole punt and punt return, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but he's been calling that. He's a special teams ace. I love that from, these guys that are 3 deep down on the depth chart at linebacker. They have to get their recognition. And if they're doing their thing, that means the linebacker core as a whole is really, really good. Asa Newsome, also shout out, coming back from the ACL. He looks good. He looks scary. He looks like the Predator.
Chef, ever the aesthetic guy. I think Asa Newsome was one of the first guys you talked about having that aesthetic. Last group, DBs, where there's been question marks. So, Ryan, where would you grade the DBs? Let's lump them all together or separate them out, however you want to approach it. I know we've got Keenan Garber in the cornerback group. We've got just you throw it at me.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is. Like in man coverage or whatever, I think I wouldn't take hardly. There's not many cornerbacks I would take out there over Jacob Parrish and Keenan Garber. They're solid, but there's just been countless mishaps, miscues, not using your eyes. I mean, we saw that in the Tulane game, right? We saw it when things unraveled after the turnovers. What's the worst thing to happen is go give up a touchdown. The defense couldn't get stops, and that was because of the mishaps. And, so again, we'll get into the coaching here, play calling, right, after this. And so that does not really, in my opinion, fall on that at all. That's on the players, and that they got better, right? Oklahoma State, they had whose fault was it? I mean, I'd have to go back and look on the flea flicker, but that other than that, though, like they kept the lid on things. I know Alan Bowman is like probably the worst quarterback that I've covered ever, but that's aside from the point. They were solid. Man, like I think the corner, if you want to separate it out, the cornerbacks have been better than the safeties. That's all. That's what I'll say. So to lump them all together, though, man, that's tough. Maybe a B minus, but if you're doing corners, I'd go like B plus or A minus, and then the safeties are getting a low C, high D.
Yeah, that's good. I think the cornerbacks have been very solid. Jacob Parrish is turning into, I say turning into, but I think he's quite frankly one of the best cornerbacks in the Big 12. Just an extremely athletic, dynamic player. The interception that he had against Oklahoma State was, just a really great play. It's not even just a one-handed interception, but playing the ball. I love seeing Kansas State quarterbacks turning around and playing the ball because historically that was not a big thing back in the before Kleiman days. The cornerbacks I think have been very solid. It is the safeties that have been disappointing. We are seeing Colby McAllister, though, who I think is improving game after game. And you're seeing him out there more and more, making plays. Jordan Riley, he has his moments. I am interested to see how he continues to, develop in this defensive scheme as we move throughout the season. Marquise Siegel finally got an interception, which is like a huge deal, of course, too. So the man coverage piece, I think Ryan makes a great point. Like this team, I think is very, very good in man coverage, but we get to zone situations and there's just this disconnect. And, we saw some of those kind of big play. I say big plays, but, third and long plays against Oklahoma State where, Alan Bowman, despite his flaws, is finding opportunities to pick up these third downs. So I don't know. It's tough. I'm going to say overall cornerbacks, I'll give it a B plus. I'll say the safeties, a C.
Yeah, I'm going to go over. I mean, outside of Jacob Parrish, I'm going everybody else is just a flat C. It's not a necessary, it's a passing grade, but it's not like they've done anything special to me. I mean, Keenan Garber had a pretty remarkable interception in Arizona that was kind of pivotal. Obviously, you could say the same thing for VJ Payne and Tulane, but those games were hit or miss. We kind of held down Tedero McMillan to 11 catches for like 120 yards. So, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous to even say, but I don't know. It's just so hard to grade defensive backs because either you're calling their name because they're getting a penalty or getting caught on, or they're intercepting the ball. So it's so bang or bust. I'm going to go C just because I want to see more plays be made from the defensive unit and just be a solid group. I wish they were just like the linebackers where they were just steady eddies all the time. And shout out to Matt for noticing the corners and DBs turning around for the ball. Remember back in the day when you didn't have to look back for the ball? That wasn't a defensive pass interference. You didn't have to look back. That was the pros. But now, for some reason, now you have to look back in college, which I don't love, but they do that. So shout out to the DBs and Clandy, man.
Yeah, and speaking of Clandy, man, where would you rate coordinator? And I know, feel free to throw in position group too. I guess I'd just be curious if you want to rate like a Tui or a Van Malone. Where would you be at on the coordinators for defense?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of said with the secondary having its issues, that does not really fall on Klanderman. I think Klanderman's been fine. It's obviously easier to have a bad running call on third down or something on offense, but on defense, it's hard to like mess up your play call. Maybe you blitz in the wrong time or something, but Klanderman's been fine. So maybe they gave up a few too many points against BYU, but I wouldn't put that on Klanderman. Player kind of gave up towards the end and had those mishaps. And so B plus, A minus, Klanderman's been pretty good. And his whole staff, the whole defensive staff's been really good as well. So.
Yeah, I would say B plus. They're this season has had definitely a lot more highs than I would say the lows. The lows I would say seem to happen more on the road, and that's something that I think if this team is truly going to compete for a Big 12 title, putting together a defense that can make stops on the road is going to be extremely important through 4 quarters, not just turning it on in the second half. I'm going to say B plus. I think again, it's been a solid group. Joe Klanderman has really put together a solid defense with a lot of guys who have developed in the program as well as some transfers that have come in too. So.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Riley, shout out to him. I mean, I think that if we're ranking all the transfer DBs that have came out, I don't know where he would be in that pecking order, and that's on Joe Klanderman. But Joe Klanderman is getting a solid B from me. He's super fun to listen to in his interviews as well. He's super honest, which I think is, I don't know, that's different than a lot of the coaches at Kansas State. There's not a lot of coach speak that comes from Joe Klanderman. He is kind of straight out there, and he'll tell you when they're bad, when they're not good, and when they're really good. So I like Klanderman. He's not as aggressive as I remember a lot of his other seasons. I feel like he's not as aggressive. At the beginning, he was blitzing every time, but I think that was because of the D-line not getting as much pressure as they were these last few weeks. So he's adjusting at halftime well, and that's really all you can want from a defensive coordinator. Make the adjustments and just keep on pushing, baby.
Keep on pushing in, and let's just lump special teams together into one rating so we can talk punters, kickers, returners, and then personnel. Chef, you already mentioned Zach Wittenberg as one of the personnel on the special teams, but I'm also curious. I feel like Chris Tennant's had a pretty good year so far. You've got McClannon. McClannon's been relatively decent as a punter. Just tell me about your thoughts on special teams. Also knowing that Dylan Edwards has a kick return for a touchdown this year too.
I'll say Simon's been more consistent than Chris. Simon's been a real pleasant surprise, and that kind of gets overlooked because it's a punter and stuff, but he's really done good with the field position. Obviously, Dylan's had that punt. I I'm blanking right now, guys. There's been some mishaps on special teams, and I'm just completely blanking. That maybe you guys can help.
BYU.
Okay, yeah. But was there one against
or like 5 guys
Tulane
tackled
or
each
Martin,
other?
Arizona? No.
Well, I think Dylan Edwards at the beginning of the season was letting some punts bounce.
Yeah.
And just letting them roll right past
Yes.
them, and we're losing field position in that term. And kick return, we haven't done anything. So I know Jace Brown had a fumble at the very beginning of the season on his his lonely kick return, and that was bad. But yeah, so I'll let you get back to your grade, but it's been a hit or miss.
Well said, man. That's all I had.
McClendon is a dog. I think he's been a pleasant surprise, like Ryan said. You just can't really ask for much from the punter, and he's taken over those kickoff duties as well, and he's been booming them out the back of the end zone, so that's kind of all you want. I'm going to give the special teams an A- because there was some sketch at the beginning. Well, okay, I'm going to go drop it down to a B+ because we did allow a 93-year-old. I keep saying 93-year-old.
You see the body language of 2 guys roll their eyes, and you change your grade.
Yeah, well, there is pressure here. I am among greatness, so I'm gonna change it to a B+ for special teams because I did call for Chris Tennant to be first team All Big 12 kicker, and that he's not.
You did call for that. That was crazy. I can't believe you did that. I'm gonna just say a B. Here's the thing. This is probably the most improved group, though, because last year was not great, especially in the punt return and kick return game. I mean, absolutely nothing. So the fact that we got a punt return for a touchdown this season, that instantly boosts the grade. Dylan Edwards, this is one of the phase of the game where he has the ability to just be so dynamic. And so trying to get him as many opportunities to be able to take the ball as possible is going to be key to our success this year. We obviously saw that, for the Arizona game and, getting a win there. So, just having him, be that kind of major player there is absolutely key for us.
All right. So moving over to the hoop side of things. So K-State, like I said, is less than a month away from their exhibition game against Fort Hays State University. Ryan, I'm just curious. So frame it up for us. This is a team coming off of a 19-15 record last season. You missed the NCAA tournament by a short margin. Next 4 out potentially, depending on, some of the bid stealers that come in, but you have a phenomenal transfer portal class come in. You got a very highly touted true freshman in David Castillo coming in. And I'm pretty stoked for this season. Personally, I think it's going to be fun to see how this team rebounds after last year, some of the challenges that you faced on and off the court. And you've got a 20-game conference season, which is unprecedented for the Big 12. So just what are some of the rumblings? What are you hearing? What do you think if you had to frame up where we're going to start this season and what you're thinking as we enter, exhibitions and non-conference play? Where are you at with K-State men's basketball?
Yeah, if you guys keep this show to an hour, that's fine. But I'm the hoops guy at Go Power Cat. Now that I'm full time, I've obviously happily stepped into more football stuff, but I love talking hoops. And so this is obviously right up my alley. Missing the tournament last year, Jerome Tang and his staff have to go out and prove that was a fluke with the whole Naquan Tomlin incident. Quez Glover didn't play a single game. Prove that was the fluke. And I've got full confidence in Jerome Tang and his staff to do that. They've got the weapons in the portal, certainly one of the best portal classes in the whole country. I don't envy the staff at all trying to divvy up minutes. It's going to be, Doug is going to start at the 1, right? You'll get a Chore probably at the 4. Coleman will get in there at the 3 or 4. But then you've got, who are you going to start at the 2? Housen can do. He can shoot it, and we've also heard that he can do more than just shoot. Castillo, they have raved about him. Either of the Joneses, that's tough. And David Gasson comes back for an extra year. How are you not going to start him? Maybe he comes off the bench, but you've got to reward him, right, for coming back. But Ugonna, I love how he's a great shot blocker, rim protector, rebounding. You don't have to be a scorer. Not everyone has to be a scorer. That's why you have the weapons around you, right? So I would love to see Ugonna just start at the 5 and be a nice dominant force down low in the paint that, not to disrespect McNair or Colbert from last year, but Ugonna defensively just really puts K-State on another level. Offensively, he needs to get some better scoring, capability, so to speak, but you don't necessarily need that when you've got so many other dudes on the roster, right? So it's going to be tricky for this staff to not only put together a starting 5, but also a pecking order off the bench.
I do have a question. I mean, I think I look at this transfer class, and Coleman Hawkins is the it's top heavy if you think about it. Coleman Hawkins, Doug, Ugonna, but there's some guys who they brought in that maybe aren't as unheralded. Maybe the accolades aren't necessarily there, but some of these guys are probably going to get major minutes or are going to be kind of that glue guy, somebody who, is going to be able to come in off the bench and give you 12 to 14 minutes a game that are extremely strong. If you had to pick one guy who you think is going to be that maybe surprise that you wouldn't have necessarily expect to be kind of in that role, who do you think that might be?
That's tough because you're saying that they're not going to play, 25 minutes a game. So a step under that, man. Like, I don't want to disrespect any player in saying that, right? But Max Jones would maybe fit that role well. Can he make this jump up from the level he's been at to the level he's at now? Probably the biggest challenge for him. I would expect more. I would challenge more from David Castillo. But as a true freshman playing in the Big 12, I know you mentioned transfers, right? But still, maybe you limit him and put a leash on him for 15 minutes a game. I think Castillo's fully capable. I would love to see him play at the 2 and be the starter, work along with Doug McDaniel at that point guard spot. I would love to see that. But, and he gives K-State such a high ceiling, but he is a freshman. He's going to make mistakes, right? We talked about it with Avery Johnson on the football side of things, right? He's going to make mistakes, but maybe if the staff just kind of plays it smart, you just say, hey, David, you give us the best 15 minutes you can give us, and maybe that's what they do with him. So Castillo or Jones, man, I think it's probably going to be one of those guards. The forwards, when you talk about just being a solid anchor or a role player or something like that, I think that kind of fits the description of a guard. So to give you one answer, man, I'd give you Max Jones, but we'll see what they do with Castillo because I think he'll probably play more than 15 minutes a game would be my hunch based off of kind of how they've raved about him.
And you talk about that part, that section of the team, that section of the bench that is going to be integral. There's guys that are even lower than that we've seen in game action. Buddy Rich is a guy that nobody's talking about. He was a true freshman last year. He didn't redshirt. He played in that Iowa NIT, and he looked strong. He's the highlight reel. Where do we expect Buddy Rich, Taj Manning, and these guys lower down on the depth chart? Do they progress to see any time on the floor?
I admire Taj Manning's, commitment to K-State to not transfer after. I mean, remember Taj Manning started against USC in the first game of the year, and then minutes just completely went to the floor, right? Like 0 throughout pretty much the rest of the year. But I admire him for sticking with the program, right? That's some true loyalty and dedication in today's, transfer portal era. But I think it's going to be real tough for him to, see the floor, bluntly put. Buddy Rich is a guy that is very athletic. We all know that, but, he's still very raw. And if he can polish some things, he can probably step up onto the court. So, I mean, Bay Falls, I guess it's by. Tang said in his press conference, it's by. I've heard both, but I guess it's by fall. So that's my insider tip for you guys on the show. With him coming out of high school, right, and McDonald's All-American, you shouldn't necessarily need any sort of endorsement for his potential, right? But I think right now he's another guy, like kind of like Buddy Rich, just maybe needs some polishing. Maybe might be a year away, maybe not. We'll kind of have to see where that goes. Moby Ike Garuka out of the JUCO ranks again, I think is a guy that might have to take a year to kind of get into the groove of playing at a Power 5 program. Not that he's a project or anything like that, but guys can, certain guys pick it up quicker than others, right? And so that's going to be the biggest thing for some of those guys that are maybe in the middle half, bottom half to get into that rotation, is picking up just the speed, the physicality of playing in the Big 12.
I guess another quick personnel question. So a guy we haven't really talked about yet is a Chor, and he comes in. He had that game against KU in the NCAA tournament that everybody points to where he had 25, 30 points. What are you hearing about him, and what kind of a role do you think he's going to play on this roster?
Yeah, you got to love the NCAA tournament experience, man. And you go up and down the roster, man. Like, not everybody on this team has played in one. Like Brendan Housen, right? He's played in 2 NITs in his first 2 seasons at Villanova. And, Doug McDaniel's been outspoken about wanting to get to the big dance, right? Like, so, but a Chor, that's where his experience is key, right? He played great against KU, right? And, what's that guy's name? Timberlake for KU. Like, remember that foul call? Like, Samford had a very good chance to win that game, guys, and they were robbed. And so, a Chor is obviously a key player on that. And so he's, this team is very athletic, but more importantly, they're versatile, right? A Chor is such a versatile player, creating so many, challenges for the defense. He's not like Arthur Kaluma, but he can do he can shoot it. He can do stuff near the basket. So in that regard, he's, think of it like that, where he can put the defenses in some mismatched positions and beat you in more ways than one. And obviously when you've got a player like that draws attention, it sets up your other teammates. And so a Chor, man, is, I think, probably the most versatile player on the whole roster.
I kind of want to ask, thinking about last season, and I would admit there was some hype going into last season with some of the transfers that were brought in, and the team didn't necessarily mesh as well. If you think about it, kind of holistically, what have you heard from the coaching staff regarding maybe making some adjustments or changes to how they are looking at the team dynamic, or just this upcoming season compared to last season?
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily what you're getting at, but for example, with the Naquan Tomlin incident, I know kind of right after that happened, Tang spoke with the media publicly and just said, our staff has to do everything in our power to make sure something like this does not happen again. Right. And so, they don't get into the specifics on like some of their team, team gathering, bonding events, right? But Shark Week, obviously, kind of where they're just put through hell, right? For 7 days, and physically conditioning and getting through that. Like, I know that builds the chemistry. But we spoke with Brendan Housen and Max Jones both on Tuesday earlier, and they talked about just this team's got good chemistry. They're friends. Max Jones said that it is like a family, and that's not something he's used to. Usually it's just a basketball team is what he said, but he says that, K-State's like a family. And so I just based off of kind of the interactions that I've just kind of seen walking in and out of the press conferences and the brief conversations we've had, right? Like they look like a very together group. Not that last year wasn't, but I think David Gasson, I'd have to go back and look, but he said in his press conference that, this, I don't quote me on any of this, but I think he said something along the lines like last year, this year is more together than last year. Paraphrasing, I could be a little off on that, but that's kind of what he said. And so that's obviously key to have a group of guys that are together, and, knock on wood, nothing with President Linton happens again, but you guys cannot, you can't that was a distraction for this team. What happened to Naquan Tomlin I shouldn't have happened, right? I don't want to dive into that. That's not what you were trying to go for, Matt. But that played a distraction, and it seriously, obviously losing your star hurts, but the way that it happened made it so much more worse. And so, that just, but for this group, I know I'm going on a rant here. I'm sorry, guys, but for this group here specific, I think that they've, Drum Tang has gotten a good group of guys, and it's not just a player coming in here for the NIL, right? You have to fit into your locker room. Drum Tang and his staff have done a great job with that.
So let's talk more about this basketball team and the non-con that they go through. I mean, the non-con is, I don't even know what to say. We complained when it was too hard, and now, we don't have a lot going into Bramlage this season. We get the visit with Cam Carter coming back home to visit us with his LSU Tigers, St. John in New York. That's going to be fun. I don't even know if is he still the coach or guy, white suit guy? What's his name? I don't even remember.
Rick Pitino, yes.
Rick Pitino. Is he still the coach there? I'm not sure. But this non-con, explain what you're seeing with this non-con, and if we don't go undefeated through it, is that a disappointment?
Yes. Yes, it would be a disappointment. Well, they can lose one, maybe two max, but it is a weaker non-conference slate, right? But people bash me for saying this, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as you think. Like, Wichita State's not a terrible program. Drake, LSU, St. John, like 3 of the 8 teams, 3 of the other 7 teams rather, in that Paradise Jam and the Virgin Islands coming up made the NCAA tournament, right? And K-State didn't. So, before you want to talk trash, if you're a fan, look at yourself in the mirror on those teams in the Virgin Islands. Like, they made the tournament and Kansas State didn't, right? So I think K-State go out and have something to prove in this non-conference. But when you look at the way that, now obviously K-State had a lot of issues on the court last year, turnovers, and, I could go down the list, right? But what ultimately really held K-State out of the tournament wasn't necessarily losing the games on the court. It was the resume, right? Like the non-conference. So look at Iowa State taking advantage of an easy resume and just winning your games and blowing the crap out of your opponents, right? Like an Oral Roberts or a North Alabama overtime victory early on in your non-conference slate, despite the win, guys, does not look good on your resume. That kills your net rating. And so there's nothing at all bad or wrong about having an easy non-conference schedule with the way things are kind of constructed right now. So, K-State went 8-12, had a nice win over Texas in the Big 12 tournament. They had 9 conference wins. Like, that usually should get you in. The non-conference slate last year largely is kind of what held K-State out. So there's nothing wrong, again, with having a weaker non-conference slate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think that, Wichita State is always going to pose a challenge. Who knows if they're going to improve or not with Paul Mills, but that's a guy who comes from the same coaching tree as Coach Tang from the Scott Drew coaching tree. So if you're going to find a guy who's going to be able to challenge his tendencies and know what he's going to throw at you, Paul Mills is going to be one of those guys who's going to be able to do it. So I'm not going to sneeze at Wichita State, even though, what is that? Is that the last game of that series so far, or is there one more left? I don't recall off the top of my head, but conference schedule wise, so we got that slate earlier last week. You open up with Cincinnati. And the thing that stood out to me is I think 4 of the last 6 games that you play on weekends are at home. They're at Bramlage Coliseum at Bramlage Coliseum to finish the season. And you finish on senior night with a game against Iowa State, which I love playing Iowa State in that last game of the season. I think that should just be an every year thing. But what are you thinking about the conference slate now that we've got this 20 game conference schedule? And how do you like kind of the home road split and when those games fall?
Well, probably one of the biggest things is Jerome Tang has been outspoken about peaking heading into March Madness, right? And that's true for every team. You want to play your best basketball really when it matters most. And Kansas State's schedule to end out the Big 12 play, you mentioned the home games, it's very favorable. There's 2 rough patches, which is inevitable in the Big 12, but the last 6 games, I think, I don't have the schedule, but are very winnable. And then, of course, Iowa State at home is going to be a big challenge, but, Jerome Tang has never lost to Iowa State in Bramlage Coliseum. So K-State's going to give a good fight in that game. And so if K-State can take advantage of that rather weaker slate to end out the conference, slate, go into the Big 12 tournament, maybe win it, maybe pick up a few wins, you've got all the momentum in the world. heading into March Madness. But, I mentioned it. There's a few brutal stretches, but guys, there's really no point in diving into that, because with how good the Big 12 is, you cannot escape that. You simply can't. You've got Arizona, Baylor, KU, Iowa State, Houston. Like, there are just so many good teams up at the very top, but it's not a top heavy league. The depth in the Big 12 is going to be on full display next season. So, I mean, the only kind of thing that I thought was nice of the Big 12 was you've got, I think it was Utah and then BYU, or maybe vice versa, but it's a Saturday, Monday. That's nice. You can that's basically one less road trip you have to go on, right? And that matters, right? Getting adjusted to that altitude is a very, very real thing. Me and Fitz out in Provo last week or 2 weeks ago, we wanted to go to bed. Like, we were so tired before that game even started. Now, the late kick didn't help, but knocking out a road trip, avoiding a Saturday, Monday turnaround when you have to travel between games, guys, that does matter. That stuff can add up. And so, and this is not anything new. This happened in the summer when we first initially just got the teams, right? K-State has a pretty favorable schedule, right? And that's objectively speaking, right? Like, they only get Houston once and it's at home, right? Like, there's, you go down the list, it's not perfect, but it's impossible to be perfect. And so it's favorable. I like it for Kansas State. They've got some chance to do some special things in this conference play.
Yeah, you do have that stretch of Houston, Tech, KU, Baylor. That's going to be a tough stretch. I'm sure there's others on here. KU, Arizona, BYU. That could be tough as well. But if, gun to your head, if you had to put a record prediction on this season, and maybe let's do like a floor and a ceiling, where do you think K-State's going to land for this hoop season?
Haven't necessarily put much thought into the record, but I've continuously said 6th place is probably where I think this team is. I just think it's going to be so tough to crack into that tier 1 group of teams here in the Big 12. It's just a whole nother level up there. So I think that really the ceiling, man, is a couple of those teams slip up and struggle, and K-State outkicks its coverage in this next season, can finish 3rd or 4th. I think this team has so much depth, though, that, a sub 500 record would be a massive letdown from these guys. I'd be shocked if that happened, to be honest. They've got a lot of depth, a lot of playmakers. So, I would say maybe to give you a record, 12-8, which is so weird to say. 20 games are going to be played, but I think 12-8 is attainable for this team. I just think the biggest challenge isn't going to be beating your Arizona States and Colorados and Cincinnati's of the world. It's how can Kansas State perform against that top 5 group of teams? Like I mentioned, can you steal some of those victories, especially defending your home court? That's going to be so important. So 12-8 probably my Big 12 record prediction, but I think that could fluctuate a little bit. I think around 5th, 6th, 7th place is where I'd feel just so much more confident in this group finishing. That might be a few games more, a few more wins or a few more losses, or vice versa, whatever. But I think that when all things kind of even themselves out, 5th, 6th, 7th place.
I've got one last question before I get out of here. You were at the press conference with Max Jones and Brennan Howson today, right?
Yeah.
When Max Jones said, and I quote, Brennan Howson is the best shooter in America, did that make anybody in that place laugh?
You referencing the Tyler Perry comments?
Yes. I'm wondering if Max Jones even knows about those comments before he said that.
I doubt it, man. I doubt it. I actually, to be honest, man, that didn't cross my mind. I think I was typing or something. I didn't think to look around, but that's it's interesting. It's interesting. That's all I'll say. But Tyler Perry obviously had some clutch moments last year, but was not the best shooter in America, right? But it's interesting though with Howson. It really is, because everybody, including myself, kind of just thought that he was going to be just a sharpshooter for this team, right? But they've been adamant that they want him to be more than just a sharpshooter. Play defense and facilitates, do all the things, right? They've made it clear that they want him to be more than just a sharpshooter. If you look at what he did at Villanova, that doesn't back that up one bit, but also in a different system, we'll see if that changes. And so I don't want to say one way or another, but I mean, make no mistake about it. Housen is he is a sharpshooter. Now, if he can do more than that, then great. But at the very least, you're expecting a guy at the very least to come in and hit, 40% of his 3-point shots.
Well, hopefully Brandon Housen has some other fishing buddies on the roster, because I love that comment today as well. But Ryan, thanks again a ton for coming on tonight. Let the people know where they can find you, and feel free to plug whatever you've got going on over there at 247 Go Power Cat and K-State Insiders. Well,
yeah, guys, the little report cards we're doing the exact same thing on Go Power Cat for our VIP subs, and obviously written form, but those will be up later this week. And it's not just me though; it's Fitz and Cole and Wally and all the guys, Big B's getting in on that as well. So that's obviously good stuff. And you guys all know the Insiders is, every Monday, and Questions podcast is going to be a little later this week, but obviously it's on the Go Power Cats YouTube channel. And maybe not right now, I'd have to look, but there's always, there's always specials, like where you can get $1 for a month, or, the yearly sub at a half price or something. So keep an eye out for it. If there's interest there, but yeah, I mean, I've only been full-time, guys. I'm repping my Taco Lucha shirt here. I was bartending there for over 3 years. And, guys, you mentioned Annie Mae's here for the podcast, right? Like I live a 30-second walk. I basically live in Aggieville from Annie Mae's. I should have just brought my laptop and did the show live from there. I think that would have been really good for the sponsor. So maybe next time we can keep that in mind. But, I've only been full-time with Go Power Cat for a little over a month and a half now. And it's been awesome, man. It's been literally a dream come true growing up a big fan and coming to games for as long as I can remember. It's been great. And obviously getting to know people like you, coming on shows and stuff, it keeps me busy, and it's been a lot of fun. So Bob Trollsby and Fireball Matt and Chef, it's really been an honor.
Well, it's been an honor having you. You're always welcome here. And yeah, don't hesitate to hit up the $2 hams beers during Royals games as the playoffs continue for the Royals, who are at least guaranteed another game, if not two more, depending on how that series shakes out with the Orioles. But that's going to do it for us today. Once again, we want to shout out our sponsors, Beef Jerky and Annie Mae's Parlor. Remember to use the promo code not USA. Remember to use the promo code CATS at checkout for not free shipping, 10% off your next order. Also, go visit Annie Mae's Parlor. They're the best. They are the best bar in Asheville. Additionally, we are I just told you. I'm pausing the music. The music is horrible. We are also part of the College Huddle, which is the largest community of fan-driven content in the nation. Check them out at thecollegehuddle.com and follow them on social media at College Huddle. Last but not least, you can follow our show at Cokie and Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram, or follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier. And Fireball Matt is at Matt Margessini. Chef.
Play that beat, baby. Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
We are all coke and no joke. Wildcat Country.
That's right.
That's right.
Jesus Christ.